Hey guys, tonight we're wading into something a little murky, literally. You're ankle deep in a Victorian marsh, your breath fogging in the midnight air. And your only companions are slugs that suck blood for a living. You're not a doctor. You're not a scientist. You're a leech collector, the kind who doesn't use nets or clever tricks, just your bare, freezing legs. And no, you don't get hazard pay. Also, you're probably going to pass out from blood loss before sunrise. So yeah, you wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes. The ground squelches under your boots, though calling them boots is generous. They're more like patchy leather ghosts, and they do absolutely nothing to keep out the marsh. The moon hangs low, a faint smudge behind soot-colored clouds, and each step forward feels like sinking into something older than England itself. Every night begins the same, in the cold, in the dark. In the stink of damp reeds and iron-rich mud, you carry two things: a lantern that gives off more smoke than light, and a satchel full of glass jars, each one rattling gently like the teeth of something recently exhumed. You don't carry food. You don't carry water. Just a piece of stale cloth for tourniquets, and a small folding knife for when they don't let go. And then you stop. You know better than to splash around. The trick, of course, is stillness. Warmth. You plant yourself mid-mire. Roll your trousers up and stand there like bait on two legs. You let the chill creep up, and you wait. It never takes long. First, there's the tingle, a soft prickling along your calves. Then a sharper sting. Then a dozen more. You glance down. Black ribbons squirm against your skin. 1, 2, then 6, maybe 10, all writhing like ink that's learned to feed. You don't sweat them. You whisper, "Good lads," because these are your wages. They may be parasites, but tonight, they're also your best chance of affording coal, or bandages, or one of those vinegar-soaked rags the doctor swears will stop your head from spinning. A few meters away, something splashes. Not big, probably a fox, or another collector. You don't look, because there's a rule out here. Eyes down, hands steady, mouth shut. The leeches don't like panic, and neither do the others. It's quiet for a long while, just your blood warming the water. Victorian doctors love leeches, and not just one or two. No, they want hundreds. For headaches, colds, spleen problems, bad dreams, women's moods, men's egos, children's stutters. If someone's sick, especially if they're rich, they want to be drained thoroughly, which is ironic, because you are the one getting weaker by the minute. Your legs have gone numb. Your fingers tingle. You reach down, slowly, and begin the collection. You pull the fattest leeches from your calves, coax them gently into the jars, plop, 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 like wriggling coins into a grimy bank. You count them not in numbers, but in rations. 3 leeches equals bread. 7 equals vinegar. 10? That might just buy you one whole egg. A gust of wind ripples through the reeds. You shiver, not because of the cold, but because something brushes your neck, soft and wet and unfamiliar. You sweat it away. A leech, not one of yours. No jar nearby. No one in sight. Odd, but you say nothing, because that's also the rule. You never talk about the ones you didn't catch. A while later, your knees buckle. You sink down for a moment, just to rest, just to breathe. The lantern flickers, then steadies. The leeches squirm louder now, inside the jars, inside your socks. Probably inside the cuts you didn't know you had. It's hard to tell what's yours and what's theirs anymore. Some historians argue about whether leech collectors were ever truly respected. Others say it was just a trade like any other, muddy, necessary, and poorly paid. But most agree on one thing: it was the only job that demanded blood as a down payment. You finally rise. Legs trembling, jars full, boots soaked. And tomorrow, you'll do it again. Because the doctors never stop bleeding people. And someone has to feed the jars. You learn pretty quickly that your body isn't just a tool. It's the bait. Not metaphorically, literally. If you don't let the leeches bite you, you won't have anything to sell. And no, you don't get special padding or long-handled scoops or gloves dipped in mint oil. That's all fantasy. The real method? Bare legs in the bog, blood in the water, and the patience of someone who no longer fears infections because they're already part of you. You roll your trousers even higher tonight. The bog water is colder than usual, like it's remembering winter too well. The wind cuts across the open marsh and bites harder than the leeches. But you stand still, because stillness is survival. The first one finds you in 30 seconds. It latches on below your knee, wriggling in delighted spirals. Another attaches to your ankle. 2 more to your inner calf. You don't flinch. You just count them with your breath. For leeches. 5. 6. They're faster tonight. Hungrier. Probably because the last few collectors stopped coming. No one says why. You just noticed fewer shadows on the water. Fewer lanterns bobbing in the dark. Maybe they quit. Or froze. Or finally ran dry. You shift your weight slightly and hear a tiny squelch. That's the sound of the bog claiming your left shoe. You don't bother trying to dig it out. You'll lose the other one by dawn anyway. A mosquito lands on your cheek. You slap it and instantly regret it. Your movement sends ripples across the water, and the leeches pause. You've spooked them. A few detach and slip away into the muck. There go 3 hours of income. You whisper, sorry, to no one in particular. Then hold still again. Back when you started, you thought this job was disgusting. You gagged the first time a leech latched onto your toe. You cried the first time you peeled one off, and it didn't stop bleeding for 2 days. No? You only cry when one slips between your fingers and disappears before you can jar it. The trick is to time the collection just right. Too soon, and they won't be plump enough to sell. Too late, and they might burst. Little bags of red goo that mean nothing to your broker and everything to your stomach. So you wait. You let them drink. You've heard rumors of collectors using animals, sick dogs, tied goats, even pigs with shaved legs. But that takes money, time, space. You've got legs. That's enough. Some leech dealers are picky. They say leeches taken from a man's thigh sell for more than ones taken from his ankle. Some clients claim the ones that drink near the pulse are the strongest. You once tried to attach one to your own neck just to raise the price. You fainted before it finished. Lesson learned. Another sharp nip, this time on your inner thigh. You grit your teeth. You don't swat. You count. 9 now. You'll wait until 12 before you start jarring. The thought of 12 little mouths sipping from you at once used to make your skin crawl. Now, it's oddly comforting. Warm. Almost like you're being remembered by the world. Touched by something that wants you. Even if it's only because you're soft and slow and full of fluid. Like being hugged by cold spaghetti. You once said to another collector. She didn't laugh. She just nodded. She's gone now, too. Most of the others are. Some historians still argue whether collectors use their own blood out of necessity or laziness. But honestly, you don't care. You just know the leeches prefer you. And there's something strange about being wanted, even by creatures this small. You finally start collecting. You move your hands slowly, gently, so they don't panic and drop off. You slide your fingers under each slick body, coax it off with a whisper, and plop it into a jar. It coils around itself immediately, confused and wet and furious. You don't mind. You've been all those things, too. Somewhere behind you, an owl hoots. Somewhere closer, something bigger moves. You don't turn around. You've learned not to look at things that move in bogs. You finish jarring 12 leeches and feel lightheaded. Your knees creak as you straighten. Your legs shimmer in moonlight, striped red, punctured in polka dots. Like an old map of roads that lead to nowhere. Your breath comes in short, shallow pulls. You're down a pint. Maybe more. But you smile anyway, because your jars are full. And tomorrow, you'll have just enough coin to buy bread that doesn't need to be chewed for 5 minutes. You step forward, and something squelches again. There goes your second shoe. You don't stop. You've still got your legs. And that's all the bait you'll ever need. They say in Victorian England, no ailment existed that couldn't be cured by bleeding it out. Headache? Leeches. Toothache? Leeches. Melancholy? Hysteria. A stubbed toe. Or a general sense of foreboding. Leeches, leeches, and more leeches. You hear that every time you deliver your jars. The apothecaries practically drool over your haul. And they always say the same thing. Ah, good. We've had 10 patients faint this morning. We were nearly dry. You wonder sometimes how anyone survived the medicine of the time. But it's not your job to question it. It's your job to fill the jars and keep your own blood mostly inside. Mostly. Your newest client is a gentle physician in a cravat so tight it looks like it's slowly throttling him. He orders 24 leeches a week and insists they only feed on clean people. Which is hilarious, considering your fingernails are stained rust red and your socks haven't been dry since last Thursday. He holds one up to the light like it's a fine cigar. This one, he whispers, will be perfect for a lady with tremors. You try not to look offended, or to tell him that leech had been stuck to your kneecap an hour ago. Because yes, these people buy your blood. They just don't know it's yours. The doctors never bother asking how you harvest them. They prefer not to know. They prefer stories about mysterious bogs and ancient wisdom. They think the leeches volunteer. You watch the man pack them gently into a velvet pouch, then hand you a single shilling. That's less than what it costs to replace your torn belt. But he smiles like he's given you a treasure. You thank him anyway, with a limp and a bow, because that's what gets you invited back. You pass two other collectors on your way out. One limping, one coughing something too thick to be normal. They don't speak to you, but they glance at your satchel, weigh its fullness with their eyes. You tighten the straps. There's an unspoken competition among leech collectors. Not about who's toughest, not about who bleeds more. It's about who lasts longest before needing a transfusion from the apothecary. You're up to 4 weeks now. A personal record. Back in the marsh, you think about the doctors again. Some of them still believe bloodletting balances your humors, those 4 invisible fluids that apparently decide whether you're angry or depressed or slightly gassy. Some doctors bleed their patients 3 times a week, others once a day. You once overheard a nurse brag that her patient was drained to perfection. The patient died an hour later. Some historians still argue about whether this was quackery or cutting-edge medicine. Some say it was both, dangerous, but better than doing nothing. But when you're ankle-deep in a mire, collecting your 12th leech of the night with 3 bites already turning purple, you wonder if maybe the whole country just has a thing for drama. There's certainly no shortage of it. You meet a woman named Nell who says she once harvested 50 leeches in one night, but she collapsed walking home. She claims she dreamed she was floating above her own body, and that the leeches were still crawling up her spine. You nod politely and give her half your biscuit, not because you believe her, but because you've seen weirder things out here. The demand keeps climbing. The richer the patient, the more they want to bleed, especially if they're in fashion. It's fashionable to be pale, to tremble slightly, to look like you've been kissed by death and asked it to call again later. And you? You're their supplier, their artisan butcher, their blood courier. Of course, your own skin has gone a bit pale too. You blame it on the fog. Still, you try to keep your spirits up. You hum when the leeches bite now. You name the plump ones. Last week's winner was called Mrs. Button. She drank enough to buy you a bowl of stew. You were grateful. The stew was terrible. And tomorrow, there will be more orders, more jars, more doctors with wide eyes and shaking hands and patients convinced that the cure for everything is hiding in a slug with teeth. And you? You'll roll your trousers again and step back into the bog. There's something about the way the jars rattle when they're full. Not clink, not clack, rattle. Like bones in a sack. Like teeth in a drawer. Like someone whispering through glass. You wear 6 of them strapped to your waist, 3 on each hip, like a gunslinger armed with nightmares. The straps are old leather, cracked and mildewed. And they squeak when you walk. Not that you walk often. Not when the leeches are inside. Because once they're in the jars, they don't stop moving. They press their sluggy little faces to the glass. Squirming, spinning, pulsing like black silk on a drum. You swear they can smell your skin. Some of them recognize it. That's the trouble with using your own blood to bait them. They remember you. And worse? Sometimes they escape. It happens slowly. One moment, everything is still. The next, you feel something cold and sticky crawling up your side. A twitch near your ribs. A wet slap against your back. And there it is, a leech that's found its way out of the jar, up the inside of your coat, and has decided your armpit is tonight's buffet. You stop screaming after the first few times. Now you just mutter, not again, and try to peel it off before it disappears somewhere. More personal. But oh, they're clever. One of them, you called it Tobias, hid in your boot for a full day. Didn't bite, didn't move, just waited. And when it finally latched on, it shows your arch, right where it hurts the most. You bled for 4 hours. And yet you didn't kill it. Because Tobias was fat. And fat leeches mean coins. Still, it's hard not to resent the jars. Especially when they leak. Oh yes, they leak. The lids aren't perfect. Most are cork. Some are cloth with wax smeared over. And on hot nights, when the glass warms and the bodies wriggle harder, the whole contraption can burst like a bad pie. You lost a whole night's work once. 16 leeches. Gone. Scattered across the mud like runaway pearls. And by the time you collected half of them again, they were too traumatized to sell. Just limp. Disinterested. Like you after a sermon. Some historians claim collectors often grew fond of their jars, decorating them with carvings or paint, whispering to them before sleep. You don't know about that. You mostly just curse at yours. But there is one jar. The tall one. The one with the chipped bottom and the iron wire around its lip. You've had it for 3 winters. And somehow, its leeches always bite best. You've never named it, never cleaned it properly. But when the other jars are twitchy or slow, this one hums. A little vibration deep in your palm. You think it likes the cold. Or maybe it likes you. And if that thought chills you, well, welcome to the job. The jars are alive in a way. Not just because of what's inside, but because they know your rhythms. They rattle louder when you're weak. They shift when you lie. They grow heavier when you're scared. And tonight, as you walk through the thick mist, past a half-dead oak and into the deeper part of the bog where even frogs won't sing, they're very heavy. You try not to listen to the stories. The ones about leeches growing too large to fit the jars. The ones about collectors vanishing, only to be found days later, their skin pale and empty. The jars on their belts cracked and smeared with blood from the inside. You tell yourself that's nonsense. You tell yourself that jars are just containers. Like boots. Like lungs. Like coffins. But still, every time one of them shifts too much or presses too hard against your thigh, you flinch. Because you've bled for these things. And some nights, they want more. You notice it first in the baker's queue. The woman in front of you wrinkles her nose and inches away, subtly but clearly. A small shuffle, a tilt of her shoulders. The kind of motion people reserve for chamber pots and soured milk. You glance behind, no one there. Just your boots, your satchel, and the unmistakable smell of your work. It clings to you. Not like smoke or fish or coal, those things burn off. This seeps. Into your coat, your hair, your nails. It lives in the seams of your collar and under your fingernails. It rides on your breath like a second voice. It's the reek of wet blood, swamp rot, and something alive. Not fresh, not dead. Something in between. The leech smell. You try scrubbing. Once, you soaked in a bath of vinegar and lye and came out with a rash and a burn across your ribs. Didn't make a difference. The scent stayed. A collector's cologne. Now you just stop pretending. You leave your scarf unwashed. You keep your distance from crowds. You sit at the back of church not because of shame, but because people tend to faint when you kneel near them. At first, it hurt. Now it's a kind of power. You walk through alleyways like a ghost with a warning label. Dogs give you space. Thieves look the other way. Even drunkards cross the street, murmuring about that damp one with the glass clink and the shadowed eyes. You're not even sure if it's your eyes anymore. It might be the jars. They reflect things strangely. You've noticed. In the flicker of lantern light, your face looks stretched, pale. Sometimes it's not your reflection at all, but someone older, more hollow. Someone with gills behind their ears. But maybe you're just tired. After all, sleep comes slow these days. It's not just the itching from the bites, though that's bad enough. It's not the cold, or the weight of the jars pressing against your spine. It's the dreams. Last night, you dreamed your blood had turned black and sluggish. That it pulled away from the needle when a doctor tried to drain it. Like it had learned. Like it had grown stubborn. Or, hungry. You woke with nosebleeds. And 3 new bites you didn't remember earning. Some historians suggest that collectors were viewed with a kind of reverence. Half outcasts, half priests of decay. There are old prints of leechmen walking barefoot, ringed by dogs and children, their jars like reliquaries. But you think that's just old romantic nonsense. In reality, you're avoided like rot. Except by the sick. Oh, the sick love you. They greet you at the door, trembling hands outstretched. Got anything fresh? They ask. Something strong? One man insisted on sucking a leech himself. Said it worked faster that way. You sold him too and didn't ask questions. The smell didn't bother him. He said it reminded him of war. You suppose that's fair. The leech trade is a kind of battlefield. You lose parts of yourself in tiny, slippery skirmishes. You count victories in ounces of blood and meals bought with bruises. The enemies are small, faceless, and far too familiar. But the wounds? Oh, they add up. You've taken to rubbing lavender under your nose. Doesn't help much. Now you just smell like a bouquet at a funeral. One boy in the market whispered, "There goes the swamp man," and laughed. You wanted to correct him. Tell him it's the swamp's man. The bog owns you now, but you let it go. Because the moment you open your mouth, people hear the bog, too. In your wheeze, in the clag of your breath. In the gurgle in your throat you can't quite swallow. The smell is inside now, and it's not going anywhere. You notice it first in the baker's queue. The woman in front of you wrinkles her nose and inches away, subtly but clearly. A small shuffle, a tilt of her shoulders. The kind of motion people reserve for chamber pots and soured milk. You glance behind. No one there. Just your boots, your satchel, and the unmistakable smell of your work. It clings to you. Not like smoke or fish or coal. Those things burn off. This seeps into your coat, your hair, your nails. It lives in the seams of your collar and under your fingernails. It rides on your breath like a second voice. It's the reek of wet blood, swamp rot, and something alive. Not fresh, not dead, something in between. The leech smell. You try scrubbing. Once. You soaked in a bath of vinegar and lye and came out with a rash and a burn across your ribs. Didn't make a difference. The scent stayed. A collector's cologne. Now you just stop pretending. You leave your scarf unwashed. You keep your distance from crowds. You sit at the back of church not because of shame, but because people tend to faint when you kneel near them. At first, it hurt. Now it's a kind of power. You walk through alleyways like a ghost with a warning label. Dogs give you space. Thieves look the other way. Even drunkards cross the street. Murmuring about that damp one, with the glass clink and the shadowed eyes. You're not even sure if it's your eyes anymore. It might be the jars. They reflect things strangely. You've noticed. In the flicker of lantern light, your face looks stretched. Pale. Sometimes it's not your reflection at all, but someone older, more hollow. Someone with gills behind their ears. But maybe you're just tired. After all, sleep comes slow these days. It's not just the itching from the bites, though that's bad enough. It's not the cold, or the weight of the jars pressing against your spine. It's the dreams. Last night, you dreamed your blood had turned black and sluggish. That it pulled away from the needle when a doctor tried to drain it. Like it had learned. Like it had grown stubborn. Or hungry. You woke with nosebleeds. And 3 new bites you didn't remember earning. Some historians suggest that collectors were viewed with a kind of reverence. Half outcasts, half priests of decay. There are old prints of leechmen walking barefoot, ringed by dogs and children, their jars like reliquaries. But you think that's just old romantic nonsense. In reality, you're avoided like rot. Except by the sick. Oh, the sick love you. They greet you at the door, trembling hands outstretched. Got anything fresh? They ask. Something strong? One man insisted on sucking a leech himself. Said it worked faster that way. You sold him too and didn't ask questions. The smell didn't bother him. He said it reminded him of war. You suppose that's fair. The leech trade is a kind of battlefield. You lose parts of yourself in tiny, slippery skirmishes. You count victories in ounces of blood and meals bought with bruises. The enemies are small, faceless, and far too familiar. But the wounds? Oh, they add up. You've taken to rubbing lavender under your nose. Doesn't help much. Now you just smell like a bouquet at a funeral. One boy in the market whispered, "There goes the swamp man," and laughed. You wanted to correct him. Tell him it's the swamp's man. The bog owns you now, but you let it go. Because the moment you open your mouth, people hear the bog, too, in your wheeze, in the clag of your breath. In the gurgle in your throat you can't quite swallow. The smell is inside now. You didn't think there'd be so many colors of blood. You thought it was all red, just different shades depending on who was bleeding and how much. But no, Victorian doctors, in their eternal curiosity or madness, were obsessed with types of blood. Not just the future A, B, or oh no, that was decades away, but a kind of poetic taxonomy. They described it like wines. Thin and nervous, robust and choleric, melancholic sap, peasant rich, but uncultured. You once overheard a physician insist that the blood of a red-haired child was spicier than that of a dark-haired man. He was entirely serious. He wore spectacles the size of biscuits and labeled his leech jars by personality. And now, you're the one supplying his menu. Because here's the twist no one tells you about being a leech collector in Victorian England. You're not just gathering leeches. You're part of the study. One day, a doctor stops you after delivery. He adjusts his gloves, white, fine, barely scuffed, and says, "Would you be willing to contribute?" You blink. Contribute. He smiles. Your blood. You've been exposed to so many, you're practically medicinal. You try to laugh. It sounds like a cough. He offers you a few extra coins, more than your weekly intake, and gestures toward the back room. You agree. Of course you do. You always agree when food is involved. The room is cold. The chair is leather, cracked like your lips. The tube is glass. You watch the red thread of your life unwind into a jar like yarn from a suffering spool. He holds it up and nods appreciatively. Like it's right. The next week, 2 more doctors ask. Then 5. They call it experimental humoral filtration. You call it Tuesday. Some say leech collectors developed strange symptoms, fainting fits, dreams of drowning, sudden bouts of singing in dead languages. One report described a man who swore his blood had become slippery and that it moved against gravity. You're not sure what yours is doing, but it doesn't feel loyal anymore. It hums at night. You hear it in your fingertips, in your toes, a pulsing, almost sentient rhythm, like your veins are rehearsing a message, one they haven't told your brain. You scratch more than usual. The spots around old bites don't heal now. They stretch, like they want to open again. The jars rattle harder when you come near. And your clients? They keep asking if the leeches are more refined these days. Something about them, one woman whispers, feels more human. You don't know what to say, because truth is, the line's blurring. There's more of you in them than ever before. You once tried using a sheep to gather leeches. They ignored it. You stood 3 feet away, and they squirmed across the bog to find you. So now, you let them bite. Because it's easier. Because they choose you. And what's scarier than something ancient and mindless that can recognize your specific blood in the dark? You once asked a doctor if this was dangerous. He said, not at all. We're learning so much. And then he bled you dry for an hour and paid in halfpence. Some historians argue that collectors were early test subjects in blood studies, unwilling pioneers for transfusion, immunity, even organ theory. But the records are vague. Most names are lost. And you? You're not sure you have a name anymore. But the jars know you. The leeches know you. And the blood? It's beginning to talk back. And it's not going anywhere. You used to think the bog was just water and muck. A place for biting flies, dead trees, and slippery footing. A stage for your strange little theater of jars and blood and muttered prayers to stay dry. But somewhere along the way, maybe in the 3rd week without sleep, or the night you slipped under and felt hands pulling you up instead of down, you realized. The bog is watching. It's not an eye, not exactly. More like a presence, a pressure, like air that's been thinking too long. And lately, it's been whispering. At first, you blamed the wind. Marsh wind has a voice, you know that. It plays tricks, swirls words into reeds, makes frogs croak like children calling for their mothers. But this isn't the wind, because this voice calls you by name, your old name, the one no one's used since your mother stopped waiting at the door. And worse, it asks questions. Do you remember the bottom? What did you leave behind? Would you like it back? You try to hum. You try to ignore it. But the jars rattle in time with the whispers now, and some of the leeches don't sleep. They stay awake in the dark, pressed against the glass like they're listening. The bog gives you gifts sometimes. Not nice ones. One night, your boot catches on something soft and yielding, and you pull up a hand. Not skeletal fresh, pale as cream, clean nails. A ring still intact on one finger. You drop it, obviously. But when you come back the next night, it's gone, replaced by a cluster of leeches. Fat and unusually warm. Another time, you find a mask. Clay, unpainted. A child's face, but with no mouth. You don't touch it, but when you look again, one of your jars has a leech curled inside that exact shape. You wonder what it fed on. You stop asking questions, because the bog answers now. Once, you tried to leave, just to test, just to see if you'd still be yourself somewhere dry. You made it halfway to the city, and collapsed. Your chest swelled, your skin itched. You heard gurgling in your ears like your own blood was trying to swim home. The apothecary said, withdrawal, very rare. We thought it was a myth. They gave you tea. It tasted like mud and regret. You went back that night. The bog didn't welcome you. Not immediately. It made you sweat, lose your balance. One jar shattered. You cut your palm trying to save it. But the leeches came anyway. They always do. Some historians think these collectors were primitive scientists, accidental alchemists on the edge of knowledge and madness. But others say they were just vessels, that the bog chose them, that something older than medicine moved in the muck. You believe that now, because lately, when you kneel in the shallows, you feel other knees beside you. And when you breathe, something else inhales too. You stop talking to people. The leeches listen better. They don't lie. They just ask one thing in return. Blood. The first time a patient bit you back, you thought it was a mistake. She was old, delirious, whispering about angels and salt and how the worms had moved into her bones. You held out the jar, offered a plump, half-starved leech, and as you leaned close, she snapped forward like a mousetrap. Her teeth sank into the fleshy part of your hand, the part you always try to keep unbitten. Just for balance. Her mouth was dry, but her eyes were wet and sharp. "Yours is better," she hissed. You pulled away, bleeding. The doctor barely looked up from his notes. He was too busy measuring her heartbeat with a spoon and a string, one of those charming Victorian experiments in medical guesswork. You wrapped your hand and said nothing, because deep down, you'd been expecting it. You felt it in her. Something hungry, something leech-like. It's a sickness now, not just in you, in them, your clients, the physicians. The fellow collectors you rarely see anymore, all touched by this creeping, thickening craving. Not for leeches, for what they hold. You hear it in the way they ask questions. Did these feed on someone smart? Have they tasted an artist lately? Do you have anything that's bitten a priest? They want to consume qualities, not cures. And the worst part? It works. One man, paralyzed from the waist down, walked after 3 days of letting a particular leech feed on his thigh. Said he dreamed of rivers every night. Described them perfectly. Rivers no one's mapped in centuries. Another woman claimed to smell colors after using one of yours. The fat ones, the ones that fed on you directly. She painted for 10 straight hours. When the canvas dried, even the walls stared. Now people come asking for the leech line. The pure feed. Those that carry something extra. A spark. They offer gold, jewelry, favors. One man even offered his daughter. You declined, obviously. You're not that far gone, are you? Because the truth is, you've started saving them. Not all, just a few. The special ones. The ones that bite you once and don't let go. The ones that feel warmer in the jar. The ones whose veins you can see pulsing, not black, not red, but something smoky. Like the bog got inside and wrapped itself around their tiny hearts. You mark their jars with soot. You whisper to them sometimes. Just names. Memories. Old stories your grandmother told by candlelight. They seemed to listen. One even pulsed in rhythm when you sang. Historians argue over whether collectors dabbled in blood magic. Some claim there were rituals, circles in the marsh, chants in dead tongues. But most dismiss it as superstition. Of course, they've never felt a leech answer their thoughts. You have. One night. Your hand trembled, and without lifting the lid, the biggest one bit straight through the glass. It didn't break. It melted. You didn't scream. You just whispered, finally. They come at dusk now, the buyers. Not patients. Not doctors. Not even those desperate for anything apothecaries who once squinted at your jars like they were lottery tickets soaked in slime. These ones wear gloves even when it's warm. They don't blink enough. They speak slowly. Too slowly. As if they're translating from a language older than teeth. And they want you. Not the leeches. Not the blood. You. At first it's vague. A request to observe your process. A quiet suggestion that maybe you could train someone, pass down your method. They use words like legacy and transmission and organic communion. You nod. You smile. You say no, because something about their smiles makes your ribs twitch. They start appearing where they shouldn't. Outside your door. Behind the hedges. At the edge of the bog, hands clasped, waiting like polite vultures. One of them leaves a gift, a velvet pouch. Inside is a tooth. Human. Etched with your initials. You haven't told anyone your initials in years. Another time, you find a jar. Just like yours. Same shape, same weight. But when you shake it, it's empty. Not dry. Just vacant. Like it once held something that's escaped. And on the bottom, someone scratched one word. Soon. The leeches grow restless. They try to flee when the strangers get too close. You've seen them slide under lids, wedged between cork and glass like they're trying to vanish. And your own blood? It's turned curious. You nick your thumb, and the bead that wells up looks almost iridescent. It rolls instead of drips. When you touch it, it feels like oil warmed over a candle flame. The next day, a woman knocks. You recognize her sort of. Not her face, but her posture. Like someone trying to remember how humans breathe. She says nothing at first, just stares at your belt of jars and tilts her head like a dog hearing Morse code. Then, softly, he's ready. You don't ask who. You already know. The bog's been waiting. For you. For your bloodline. For the culmination of hundreds of nights with knees in muck and lungs filled with spores and sweat, one of the jars vibrates hard enough to crack. Inside, the leech doesn't squirm. It smiles. Or maybe that's just your reflection again. Historians who've studied leech collectors note a strange pattern. After a decade, most disappeared. Not died. Not retired. Disappeared. No trace. No body. Just a belt of empty jars left on a doorstep or floating in a marsh. And sometimes, just sometimes, those jars would hum at night. You hear it now. In your walls. In your chest. In your bones. You dream of the bog's mouth. Not metaphorically, a real one. It yawns open between reeds, rimmed with moss and stone and teeth made from ancient, fossilized fish bones. The breath from it smells like copper and cinnamon and something deeper, like roots that dream. You're walking toward it barefoot, jars clinking against your hip, but they're empty now. Not broken. Just used. Like they fed something far too large to carry. When you wake, your hands are wet. Not sweat. Marsh water. The floor beneath your cot is muddy. You check the window locked. You check the door, untouched. You look down, and one of the leeches is curled against your ankle like a cat. It raises its head slightly, as if to say, "You're late." The buyers don't come anymore. Now they send notes. Folded paper, stuck in the trees outside. Rolled inside hollowed-out bones. Even once, pressed into the flesh of a gutted hare. You didn't touch that one. The messages are always the same. Return what you took. Open the skin. Feed the mouth. You try to burn them. They don't burn. You stopped bleeding 2 days ago. Not like a wound healed. No, your body still bruises, still gets scratched on thorns. But the blood doesn't come. Like it's been called back. Kept somewhere else. Held for something. You start carrying one jar filled with just water. You whisper to it, sometimes. The way you used to whisper prayers. And one night, when the wind's just right, and the frogs go silent, the water shapes itself. A ripple becomes a symbol. A letter. One you haven't seen since your mother taught you to sign your name in the dirt. It disappears before you can breathe. But it knows you saw. Some historians claim leech collectors weren't just blood gatherers. They were blood archivists. Living ledgers. Memory bearers for communities that forgot too much. One theory suggests they were used in rituals, not for healing, but for remembering. That through the blood, through the leeches, the past could be distilled and swallowed. You started to remember things that didn't happen to you. A man's last breath in 1811. A birth in the winter of 1792. A rebellion whispered through teeth filed to points. None of it yours. But you feel it. Stored somewhere behind your eyes. A historian might argue you're having a breakdown. But you know better. It's the blood. It's all the blood. It's been collecting you. And now it's full. You kneel at the edge of the marsh. The same place you started. You open the water jar and whisper, "Come." The bog answers. Not with words, but with motion. Ripples. Bubbles. A slow, steady pulse like the world itself is preparing to bleed. And from beneath the surface, something rises. It's not a leech. It's not human. But it remembers everything you've ever spilled. And it is hungry. You try to stand, but the bog doesn't let you. It presses against your legs like a familiar lover, heavy and cold, pulling you back to your knees with the kind of patience only nature possesses. You're not its prisoner. You're its investment. The thing rising before you isn't a monster. Not in the way you imagined. No scales. No jaws. No teeth gnashing under moonlight. It's human-shaped. More or less. Its limbs shimmer with wet, leech-black skin. But beneath, you see hints, flashes of other lives. A merchant's cuff. A child's knuckle. A ring you once found in the mud and tossed aside. All fused together, like it absorbed memories and wore them as armor. Its head tilts toward you, and though it has no face, you understand what it wants. Your belt of jars clinks. One shatters. Inside, the leech has split itself in two, lengthwise, like a zipper undone. You don't know if that's biology or something else, but either way, it feels intentional. From the split, a fluid seeps out. Not red, not black. Something with a pulse. You dip your fingers in it, and before you can think twice, you draw it across your forehead. Like a blessing. Like a surrender. The creature steps closer, and for a moment, everything stops. The crickets fall silent. The reeds don't sway. Even the air seems to hang breathless. Then, it kneels, right in front of you. The bog exhales. The jars sing. And in that stillness, you feel a transfer. Not of blood, of knowledge. All the memories you've collected, the pain, the healing, the hunger, the names you forgot, and the ones you never knew, they pour into the thing before you like a river cracking through a dam. And it changes. You watch it shift, morph. It shrinks slightly. The extra limbs recede. The armor of memory sloughs off, sinking back into the marsh. What remains? Looks like you. Not perfect. Not quite. But enough to make you flinch. It raises a hand. Palm open. You do the same. And when your fingers meet, it nods once. Not a gesture of dominance. Not a threat. Recognition. You've made something. Or maybe you've become something. Historians write about the mysterious disappearances of leech collectors, often dismissing them as deaths from disease or poverty. But there are those few, strange entries that speak of sightings, twins in the fog, figures who whispered old names, people who bled blue but healed others just by looking. They were called many things, but you know what they really were. Successors. The leech beside you curls around your ankle again. It hums. The bog pulses once more, and the copy, the echo, the you that isn't you, turns and walks backward into the water. Without sinking, without fear, you remain, breathing, whole, but different. The marsh accepted your offering and left you behind to collect more. Because now, you're not just a leech collector. You're a living archive, a host of memories, a keeper of blood that remembers. You stop using jars. They were always a formality, glass cages for things that were never truly tame. Now, the leeches come to you willingly. You don't need bait. You don't need to dig or wade or whisper into the water. You just stand still and they find you. They crawl into your satchel uninvited. They nestle under your collarbone as if drawn to your heartbeat's strange, new rhythm. One sleeps beneath your tongue. You can feel its pulse when you hum. The first patient after your transformation doesn't knock. He stumbles into your hut, holding his stomach, eyes wide with a mixture of fever and recognition. You're the one, he says. He doesn't mean doctor. He doesn't mean healer. He means witness. And when you press your palm to his forehead, something flows out of you. Not blood, not warmth. Memory. You see his childhood, the riverbank, the knife, the thing he buried in the orchard that no one found, but that still dreams, even now, under soil and bone. And when you blink, so does he. Tears fall. The fever breaks. He walks out different. Not better. Not cured. But remembered. And somehow, that's enough. You start attracting others. Not the rich. Not the clean. The forgotten. Those with gaps in their minds. Names they can't place. Wounds that never bleed but always ache. You don't ask what they want. You just let the leeches choose. They do, with frightening precision. Some latch onto the throat, others the soles of the feet. One wraps around a woman's ear and hums into it like a lullaby. Each patient leaves with more than they brought, but a little less of you remains each time. Your reflection's grown, translucent. When you pass windows, the glass doesn't ripple, but it pauses, as if uncertain who it's reflecting. You begin to taste mud in your dreams. Hear words you've never spoken coming from your own mouth. The bog no longer waits for you. It calls. Louder, more urgently. Not with threats, with familiarity. Like a mother's voice in a language you've forgotten. One night, your skin splits without pain. From your forearm, a tiny leech slithers out. Newborn. But it stares at you like it knows everything. You let it go. It slides under the door, into the night. You don't see where it goes. But later, someone knocks. A girl with wild hair and a map carved into her chest in scar tissue. I followed it, she says. Please, can you help me remember my father's name? You nod, and the cycle continues. Some scholars believe the leech collectors faded with the rise of modern medicine. Others say they evolved, disappeared into folklore, rebranded as witches, seers, midwives. But a few suspect the truth is stranger, that they became something else, something in between. Not quite healer, not quite parasite, a conduit. You feel that words settle into your spine like a final vertebra. You no longer fear the bog, because you're the bog now, or at least its voice. And your leeches? They've begun to whisper back. You wake up speaking a language no one's taught you. Not Latin, not Greek, not anything dead that's been shelved in dusty libraries and mispronounced by scholars with soft hands. This is older. It rolls from your tongue in clicks and sighs and sounds like wet roots breaking open. And the leeches understand. They respond. Some curl into words of their own, forming spirals and glyphs against the wooden floor. Others hum low notes that vibrate your ribs. It's not speech. It's memory. Raw, dense, alive. The girl with the scar map stays. She helps boil water, clean bandages, draw sigils with crushed petals and pond ash. She never asks your name, only calls you binder. It fits. You started braiding the leeches into your hair, not as a statement, just practicality. They prefer the warmth, and you no longer find them grotesque. Their presence is like a cloak now, a heartbeat outside your own, a congregation of witnesses. Your patients no longer knock. They arrive already whispering. They say your hut appeared in places it never was. By the river, at the base of a tree, inside a cathedral's crypt, even floating on the water, gently bobbing like it had always belonged there. When they enter, you know them already. You greet them by names they didn't remember they'd lost. You offer tea steeped with moss, not medicine. You listen. Then the leeches listen. Then they begin to feed. But not on blood. On absence. On grief. On all the tiny erasures that life slices into people until they forget who they ever were. And the leeches give something back. A face. A smell. A song. A child returns home remembering her mother's lullaby, even though her mother died before singing it aloud. An old man walks away humming a tune his own father never learned. Each time it happens, a little more of your own mind bends. Not breaks, just warps, like damp wood learning a new shape. You see symbols now when people speak, colors where their emotions sit. A man weeps, and you see ochre drip from his ears. A woman confesses her infidelity, and your fingertips tingle like they've been burned with mint. You've stopped sleeping altogether, because when you close your eyes, the blood starts streaming through you. Historians have only half glimpsed this truth, the way rituals twist when passed mouth to mouth, the way old gods sneak back through cracks in medicine, the way knowledge ferments when hidden in flesh. Some accounts say leech collectors began drawing maps on their skin, not of the world, but of what the world remembers. You check your hands. The veins pulse in a shape that wasn't there yesterday. Something spiraling. Something opening. The girl asks you if it hurts. You smile and say, it's not pain. It's remembering. The bog wants a story. Not to hear one. To be one. It doesn't speak in words. Not exactly. It sends you sensations, a rush of warmth behind your ears, the prickling of your teeth, the deep ache in your knees like you've been kneeling for centuries. Each feeling carries intent, and the intent is simple. Tell me what I am. You sit at the edge of the water with a leech coiled in your palm like a comma waiting for a sentence. You try to begin with history, dates, emperors, floods, revolutions, but the bog rejects them. The wind picks up and erases your voice. The mud thickens over your tongue. No, that's not the story it wants. So you start with blood. You tell it about a young boy who once wandered too close to the marsh and was found asleep in a bed of reeds, warm, untouched by cold, dreaming of fireflies who spoke in rhymes. He woke up with a scar in the shape of a question mark over his heart. You tell it about a mother who pressed leeches onto her own arms so her daughter could live through a fever, and how the daughter, years later, placed a jar of those same leeches by her own child's crib like heirlooms. The bog hums approval. You feel it in the soles of your feet. The girl, the one with the scar map, begins to write the stories you whisper. Not on paper, on stone, flat shale dragged from the deepest part of the marsh. She carves with a needle made of glassy bog ice. And as she does, the leeches gather around her, circling like sentinels. You didn't teach her this, but she knows it, somehow. The same way you knew the old names. Your hut doesn't feel like wood anymore. It creaks like bone. The walls exhale. Some nights you think you hear breathing from the floorboards. Not haunting, just shared respiration. A sign that the bog is listening through every crack. Some patients begin returning. Not because they need healing, but because they want to contribute. They bring relics. Bits of hair. A tooth with gold. A ribbon soaked in birthing blood. And always, stories. They kneel beside the girl. They speak softly. She carves. And the leeches hum in harmony. An ancient chord that shifts the color of the air around them. One night, a man comes who has no story. He says his memory was stolen. Scraped clean. He doesn't know where he's from. What he loves. Who he's lost. You take his hand and press a leech to his wrist. It doesn't bite. It burrows. Not into flesh, into what's left. And slowly, it begins to fill him. Not with truth, but with aversion. Memories that feel like dreams. A sibling's laugh, a barn fire, a midnight promise. They may not be his, but he weeps anyway, because now he has something to hold. You whisper, the story is the cure. He whispers back, then let me be a page. And the bog, beneath you, around you, within you, swells with satisfaction. It's learning its name, and you're the ink. The bog begins to write back, not with words, with weather. A fog rolls in that smells like roasted chestnuts and thunder. It moves in spirals, drifting through your hut, curling around your jars like fingers paging through a book. Every time it touches your skin, you feel a memory, not yours, but precise. A dance beneath gaslight, a scream swallowed in the snow, a kiss exchanged before conscription. The fog doesn't linger. It teaches and leaves. The girl, now more scribe than apprentice, begins hearing names in her sleep. She mutters them while carving, lips dry and cracking. Some names she doesn't recognize. Others make you shiver, because they're yours. Not the one you use now, the ones you had before. All of them. The bog stories are recursive, loops folded inside other loops, like leeches curling in on themselves. You begin to suspect you are not the first you, just the current layer of a long, fleshy palimpsest. One morning, the hut is gone. Not vanished, relocated. You wake to find it perched on stilts in the middle of a swamp you've never seen. The reeds here are taller than men. The sky glows the color of a healing bruise. But everything inside the hut is exactly where it was. Even the teacup. Even the girl. She doesn't act surprised. This is where the next part is. She says, you don't ask how she knows. Because deep down, you do too. The patients keep coming. Even here. They arrive in boats carved from ribs. On foot, over twisted roots. Once, a woman arrives riding a dog the size of a calf. Eyes glowing blue, voice like she's chewing fog. They all ask the same thing. Can I remember who I'm supposed to be? And you answer. Only if the bog agrees. You've stopped using the word leech. It feels small. Wrong. They're no longer tools. They're translators. They read the blood. They write the truth. Some of them no longer drink at all. They just perch on shoulders and pull softly, like tuning forks for memory. Some nights, you see them lined up along the shore, facing the water, waiting. For what? You don't know. But they hum together, low and gentle, and the marsh lights up with bioluminescent specks that float above the surface like thoughts escaped. Historians, of course, have no idea any of this happened. They blame the disappearance of leech collectors on modern science, on antibiotics, on hygiene. They don't account for the sightings, huts that vanish. People with no pulse who still speak, children born with mud behind their eyelids, and songs no one taught them. There's one theory, fringe at best, that suggests blood carries narrative structure. That memory isn't stored in the mind, but in the fluid that moves through it. That enough collected blood, properly read, could reassemble entire lives. They don't know how close they are. You do. Because now, you dream in first-person memories that aren't yours. You see from behind the eyes of someone who died in 1831. You smell pipe smoke you've never inhaled. You feel heartbreak that doesn't belong to your ribs. And the leeches? They're quiet now. Not silent. Listening. Waiting for your next entry. The bog asks for an offering. Not politely. Not cruelly. Just inevitably. You feel it one morning before dawn. A tug behind your navel like a thread being gently pulled. The reeds bow toward your hut. The water has stilled. The leeches refuse to sing. Even the girl stops carving. It wants something, she says, staring at her hands like they're strangers. You nod. But this time, the marsh doesn't want memories. It wants meat. A body. And not just any. An intentional one. A gift. You try to reason. Bargain. Surely you've given enough. Blood, time, stories. Versions of yourself now etched into the fog. But the bog doesn't deal in metaphor anymore. It speaks with silence that clenches your bones. A patient arrives that night. A boy. No older than 12, cradling a jar with a single leech. His voice is hoarse. His eyes flicker with the glassy sheen of fever and forgotten things. This one's from my mother, he says. She said it might find her again. You almost cry. Almost. But the bog pulses not angrily, just insistently. This boy is not the offering. But he brought it with him. You see it now. In the jar. The leech isn't humming. It's still. Heavy. As if full of something terrible. You take it. Hold it to your ear. No sound. Then a single word. Me. Not yours. Not the boys. The bogs. It wants this leech and all it contains. You hesitate because you remember this one. You'd released it long ago. It had crawled from your own veins, slick and shivering, carrying a piece of you that wasn't ready to be remembered. A version of your face that had whispered secrets to reeds and stitched dreams into roots. You hadn't meant to let it go, but it found its way back. And now, the bog wants it returned. The girl watches you. Doesn't speak. She understands. You walk to the water's edge. The leech rides in the jar. Not resisting, but echoing some internal storm. You open the glass. It hesitates, then slides onto your palm. And you realize you're not offering it. It's offering you. You step into the bog. Water up to your knees. The leech tightens once around your wrist. A final embrace, then releases. It melts into the water like ink. The surface goes still. You wait, and slowly, the water rises. Not by flood, by shape. It forms a pillar, fluid and shifting, inside which faces float. Dozens, hundreds, some familiar, some foreign, all blinking as one. Then a voice. We remember you. And just like that, you're filled with warmth. Not heat, not fire, but recognition. The bog has accepted your offering, not of death, but of self-awareness. You walk back to shore, barefoot and dripping, but lighter. The hut exhales. The girl returns to carving. The leeches begin to hum again, lower now, gentler. You sit at your table, pour tea, and the bog, now sated, listens, not just to you, but through you. From this moment forward, it no longer watches. It writes. You stop introducing yourself. There's no need. Strangers come with your name already on their tongues, though not always your current name. Sometimes it's one you've never heard. Sometimes it's one you haven't heard in centuries. But they say it with recognition, like you're the missing verse of a song their grandmother hummed once. Back when she still had all her teeth and a memory that stretched beyond the edge of the hearth. They arrive in twos, in threes, sometimes alone. All of them say the same thing. I dreamed about the leeches. You no longer ask how they found the marsh. No maps lead here. The roads twist in ways they shouldn't, and yet somehow, people arrive right on time. The stories have started leaking. You hear whispers in the market of a hut that heals you by remembering your pain. A marsh where your past lives wait in jars. Of a woman with hair braided in black coils that move when she blinks. You hear someone describe your face not as it is now, but how it once was. When you wore copper rings on every finger and spoke only in riddles. They say your eyes were gold. They say you never aged. You smile, because technically, they're not wrong. The girl, no. The scribe now has finished her 100th stone. She places it beside the others, a growing wall of memory slabs encircling the hut like a vertebrate crown. Each one a name, a dream, a scar remembered, some hum when you pass. Others grow moss in the shapes of letters that didn't exist before this century. One, carved in complete silence, glows faintly when it rains. You've begun to understand. These stones aren't for the bog. They're for what comes after. Because now, even the leeches have begun leaving. Not escaping, expanding. You find their trails days away from the hut, pressed into riverbanks, coiled gently around door handles in distant towns. A child in Bristol sends you a letter describing the singing worm that taught her how to say goodbye to her dead dog. The paper smells like peat. You frame it. Sometimes the leeches return. Sometimes they don't. But every time they go, a story follows. And with it, a part of you. You try to keep track, but it's impossible. You've spread too far, too thin. You are now being told in villages you've never entered. Men dream of you without knowing what gender you are. Women paint your likeness on shutters and whisper your name during labor. Old ones close their eyes and hear you hum, even if they never heard your voice in waking life. You've become folklore, not in a book, in blood, in the way people hold each other when grief claws at the door, in the way children walk toward the edge of water with a strange calm in their chest. The bog is satisfied, but you? You feel something stirring, a pull, faint and rising, like the first memory of a place you haven't built yet. And deep in the marsh, something new begins to grow. A tower of reeds, spiraling upward like thought made visible. The girl, no, the scribe, tells you without blinking. It's where the stories go when they want to come back. And you understand completely. You climb the tower barefoot. Each step is soft, not mud, not wood, but something in between. Like walking on memories that haven't dried yet. It spirals without rails. each curve revealing more sky. You're higher than the treetops now, higher than the steam chimneys of the city far beyond the marsh, where gaslight flickers and people still believe time moves in a straight line. The scribe watches from below. She's not worried. She knows this climb isn't for your body. It's for your story. You begin hearing voices embedded in the reeds around you, familiar, but twisted slightly, like a record played backward underwater. They're all you. You as a child, scraping leeches from a dying horse's leg. You as a midwife, singing to a stillborn in a thunderstorm. You as a soldier who refused to kill and was buried beneath a pile of his own medals. Each voice is a page turning in your spine, and each one says the same thing as you pass. We've been waiting. At the summit, the air is velvet. The wind has teeth, but it doesn't bite. And at the center of the platform, if you can call it that, is a mirror. Old, cracked. Its frame is made of bogwood, twisted and dark, wrapped in long-dried leeches curled like calligraphy. You hesitate, then step forward. The mirror does not show your face. It shows a book, open, pulsing, breathing. Its pages flip slowly. Each one is etched in red, not ink, not quite blood. Something more ancient, more alive. You read, and then you climbed, and then you looked, and then you remembered the end. You blink. The mirror turns, not physically, ontologically. Suddenly, it's looking through you. You don't see the hut anymore, or the marsh, or even the sky. You see readers, listeners, children wrapped in wool, mouths slack in sleep, old men with radios crackling near the hearth, night shift workers with earbuds, lulled by your whispering. Their eyes are closed, but their minds are open. And you are there, not in flesh, but in voice, in rhythm, in the shape of the story. And it dawns on you. This isn't the bog's tale. It's not even yours. It's theirs. The people who need it, who cradle their grief in quiet and wait for bedtime to feel like remembering instead of forgetting. The mirror fades, and you're alone again, but not empty, just full of endings. And as you descend the tower, the scribe meets you halfway. She places a hand on your chest. Her palm is warm. You say nothing. She says, "It's almost time." Your name begins to unravel. Not vanish, just loosen, like a ribbon slipping free from wet hair. The scribe no longer calls you anything at all. She just looks, and you feel known. You stop responding to the names visitors bring with them. They come bearing titles: healer, leech master, midwife of memory, and all you do is smile. Because names were bookmarks. You've read past that chapter. The bog has grown quiet. Not empty, just listening, as if waiting to hear itself echoed through your final words. And the leeches? They no longer hum. They harmonize. A sound like deep water curling under a lullaby. Some of them have returned from far places, with strange scars, with smells of foreign ash, sea salt, lightning. You press your fingers to their backs and feel whole stories move beneath their skin. Wars ended too late. Loves cut short by superstition. Languages that never learned to write themselves. All of them recorded, folded, tucked into your bloodstream. You bleed now without pain, because there is nothing left to lose. The scribe brings you a jar. Inside it, a single leech. Gold-striped, still, pulsing faintly. You don't need to ask. You know this one. It's yours. The first one. The one you bled into when you still thought this was about medicine or penance. We're keeping things alive. It's waited. So have you. You open the jar. The leech rises, slowly, like a candle's flame catching wind. It circles you once, twice, and then lands, softly, on your neck. You feel no bite, only a kiss, and a whisper now. You exhale, and the marsh exhales with you. The sky lightens, just a shade. Visitors pause in their sentences, as if someone walked across their grave. Even the scribe closes her eyes, because this part isn't yours anymore. The story is telling itself. Somewhere, a boy forgets why he was crying. Somewhere, an old woman sighs and finally sleeps. Somewhere, someone speaks a name they've never heard but always known. And all the voices, they hum, low, steady, unified. The leeches shimmer in time. You lie down in the center of the hut, not to sleep, not to die, but to become a chorus, a vibration, a pulse in the world's wrist. And the scribe? She begins a new stone. No words, just a single spiral. Hey guys, tonight we end where all quiet things begin, in the hush just before dawn, where breath softens and stories lean close. You're still here. You've made it through leech-laced waters. Bloodborne whispers, names folded inside reads. You've remembered what others forgot, and forgotten what no one else dared to remember. And now, as mist curls like ribbon around the marsh, you rest. The hut does not breathe. It listens. Outside, the stones hum low, like wind finding the edge of a bottle. Each carved spiral, each name, each silent gap between syllables, they shimmer with meaning no longer tied to grammar or bone. Meaning that simply is. The scribe has stopped carving. She sits beside you now, legs tucked under her, head tilted as if listening to a tune no one else can hear. The leeches lie still in their jars. Except one. It pulses gently at your side, not feeding, not storing, simply echoing your heartbeat. The last page written in muscle and memory. Your hands are folded. Your breath is slow. You see the tower in your mind, tall and swaying. Each read a note in the long song of you. And now, the song concludes. But not with a crash. With a fade. A tapering. Like moonlight seeping beneath a closed door. And as the marsh breathes one final time through you, through the stories you carried and released, through the pulses of forgotten names and remembered silences, you hear them. All of them. The midwives and the lost children, the soldiers and the dreamers, the ones who lived in your skin and the ones who only brushed past it, humming. Not loud, not mournful, just enough. Enough to wrap you in warmth. Enough to promise that nothing remembered is ever truly gone. Your vision softens. The hut blurs. The stones fall silent. And the leech, now still, curls beside your hand like a comma at the end of a thought. Not the end, just a pause. A long, soft breath before the next telling begins. Sleep now. Let the bog go quiet. Let your name drift. Slow and wide, across the dark. Let yourself dissolve into that gentle, waiting hum. Because tonight, you've been the story. And now, you are the silence. Ancient memories closed. Tonight is yours. Good night.